Hi there. I am Dean Cook,
Hey, this is Josh Craven.
and we are here talking about our accomplishments and our quest to find agents for the week.
Yeah, so this week we've been working on the things that we've talked about in our prior sessions. And so, Dean, do you have any updates on how things have been going?
I managed to get that summary I was working on finished, and that wound up being about 6 pages. So I submitted that to the agent that wanted that in my list of agents. I also sent out to about two other agents. So I ended up submitting to about three agents for the week. And that's pretty much where I was on the agent submission side of things. How about you?
Well, on my end, I've been working on the short story collection that I mentioned last week. Been getting those stories compiled and finalized. And I've also been working on a list, both of potential agents to query on the short story collection, but then I'm also looking at some smaller presses, some smaller publishing houses that will accept unsolicited submissions so that you don't have to be represented by an agent in order to submit to them. So I'm looking at potentially getting published by some of these smaller press or by a smaller press that doesn't require representation, with the hope that I can use that maybe as a bootstrap mechanism to help find an agent for the novel that I'll be querying about, the Red Phantom.
So
So
you've been sending to smaller publishing houses about the novel, or you're going to?
no, not about the novel. I'm sending to the smaller publishing houses about the short story
Oh, okay.
collection. And then if the short story collection will get picked up and published by a smaller press that doesn't require representation, then I think that'll help bolster my resume in the agent search when I'm trying to find someone to represent me on the novel.
Okay.
That's my working plan anyway. So, Dean, have you had any responses on any of the queries that you sent to agents?
I have not, other than just the usual automatic email response saying usually something along the lines of 4 to 6 weeks before you hear from us, if ever. Other than that, no responses.
And how far out are you, like on the oldest queries that you've sent out? Like, what's the longest time period you've been waiting so far?
Maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something along those lines. Yeah, I think I sent one. The first couple I sent maybe 3 weeks ago. So maybe I'll hear something in 2 to 3 more weeks, if anything.
All right. So, what else have you got going on? Have you got anything else planned for this week?
Um, for this week, I am going to try to put together some more agents, at least five. Unfortunately, with my day job, I have limited time that I can work on this thing. And another agent wanted a full manuscript, which I've gone through and I've edited the copy of my novel to a sufficient extent that I'm satisfied with sending it out, the full thing. But they also want a 1 to 2 page summary. So now I have to go back and take that 6 page summary and reduce it to a 1 to 2 page summary. And we've talked about that a little bit before, which is every agent kind of wants different things, and it really can create a bottleneck in terms of your submission process, because you got to sit and take time to tailor each submission to whatever that particular agent wants.
So, one of the things that I worked on this week, and I'm going to continue to work on in regards to both my novel and my short story collection, is refining that, making it the best that it can be. One thing I wanted to touch on in regard to that is the editing process. And that can be a real dilemma for independent authors and authors that are looking for an agent. Agents want a well polished manuscript and they want something that they can sell relatively quickly. There's not a lot of hand holding that goes on in literary agency anymore. And so you need to have a fairly finalized and finished product. But hiring an editor is very expensive, especially for an independent author or a self published author that really hasn't seen any return on their work yet. So, for example, this week in looking at editors, an editor charges 3 to 3.5 cents on average per word to edit your manuscript. So if you've got a 100,000-page novel, you're looking at about $3,500 to have that thing professionally edited. And for most independent authors or self-published authors, there's just not hardly any way that you can justify that expense. Most of us don't have that kind of money laying around, and that can make it hard without that professional editing. If you can't afford that professional editing, then it makes it hard to turn around and present the document to an agent and to sell it as a well-polished manuscript. And so one of the things that I'm kind of running up against now is not really having the money to hire a professional editor, but also knowing that a professional editor would help me sell the manuscript to an agent. And I think that's something that all of us have to continue to work with and get really good at self-editing and be able to really refine our own product and build it the best that we can, or else find alternative means for getting that document edited. Dean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree that the cost associated with getting that manuscript edited just isn't going to make sense for a lot of new authors. You'd have to be pretty well established and know that what you've got is going to sell and make you money before you could really justify an expense like that.
Yeah. So that's one of the things where Dean and I have helped each other in the past. We exchange material, read each other's material, and help provide a second set of eyes on, to some extent, on line editing issues, grammatical issues, things of that nature, but also on a bigger picture story development level. We've kind of helped each other in that regard too. And so just the time that we've spent with our own writers group and reading each other's product, I think has helped quite a bit on that front.
And that's probably how a writers group can be helpful for a new writer. I think there's a lot of pitfalls with writers groups also, but that's probably one of the advantages.
Yeah, I would agree. Say so too. All right. So Dean, what else have you found in your search for an agent?
Okay, so my search to an agent, and I've mentioned this book before, but I hadn't really gotten into it. So I want to talk about it again. And it's this book, which is Jeff Herman's Guide to Book Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents. And I bought it. I got it. I didn't buy it at the Plano Public Library where I live. Once again, I don't think I would pay for any of these, but certainly if you can get it at the library, that's great. And I really like the format on this one. It appears that what he did was he created a survey, and then he sent that survey out to agents. And I think this author himself is an agent, so I think he knew what agents are legitimate, and so he had a list of legitimate agents that are not just scams for authors or aspiring authors. And he sent them these surveys, and the surveys, some of them are, the surveys get kind of ridiculous at certain points. Like one of the survey questions is, what was it? Basically, the question was, do you think that the Earth was created in thousands of years or is several billion years old, or something along those lines? And so it's just this kind of non sequitur philosophical question or theological question out of right field, or maybe you should say left field. And most of the agents answered the way you would expect them to, which is they think that the Earth is several billion years old. I did notice there were a couple of agents. In fact, one even said, "Oh, I think the Earth was created by God, and what the Bible says is correct." So I thought that was interesting. But at any rate, most of the questions are on point. Things like, why did you become an agent? What would you be doing if you weren't an agent? What kind of books are you looking for? What kind of fiction are you looking for? That kind of thing. And so I thought that was an interesting format for doing a list of literary agents.
Do you think that kind of information in the survey helps give you some insight into the agent, maybe helps you determine which ones you want to submit to?
Yeah, it gives you some insight into the agent. Another question that was asked was, describe the writer from hell. And that's probably helpful in terms of making sure that your attitude is adjusted to conform to what agents are looking for. And another question was, do you think writers are more narcissistic than the rest of the population? And most of them, I think, said no more or less than anybody else, but a couple were like, oh, hell yes, writers are way more narcissistic than the rest of the population. And so that it gives you some insight into kind of how you should behave in order to comport yourself in a professional manner, I think, with regard to these agents. One of the survey questions that was asked of the agents was, do you think there are too many, too few, or just enough agents? And then, agents would give various responses.
What kind of responses were they given on that?
Most of them, it seemed like, were saying they thought there were just enough, but then there were some that would say they thought there were too many, or I don't think there were very many saying they thought there were too few, but I think there were some saying that they thought there were too many.
That's interesting, because if they're saying that they think there's too many, that's probably an indication that they want more business.
Yeah.
And they think that there's too many agents competing for the limited amount of business that they have.
Yeah. And I found a few that, said something like, well, the market will take care of that, which I thought was interesting that they were willing to admit that it's a market. Another question that was asked was, do you think Amazon will become the country's largest employer within 10 years? And so I thought that was an interesting question to ask as well about, the future of Amazon and how that's going to affect publishing. So
that's interesting that they would go from, do you think Amazon's going to control publishing, to, do you think Amazon's going to be the largest employer? That's a pretty broad question.
Yeah. And I took it as, I took that as Amazon, do they think that Amazon is going to be pretty much the dominant player when it comes to publishing and is going to be calling all the shots in that field? But, I don't know exactly what the intent of that question was, because it didn't exactly ask that. It asked about, whether they'd be the largest employer.
All right. Well, sounds like that book's got some good stuff in it. So I think that pretty much wraps up our session for this week. On our reading, I'm still reading the book Kinsman by Bill Pronzini. I really haven't had a lot of time to read this week, so I don't have any updates on that. You have anything else, Dean?
No, I finished Mr. Paradise by Elmer Leonard, and I haven't had a chance to go to the library and get some more audiobooks. So hopefully next week I'll have something more on that.
All right, guys. Well, don't forget that I have links down below for both mine and Dean's author pages so that you can find our books if you're interested. Leave us comments. Let us know what type of stuff you want to hear us talk about, or where you want us to go in future installments of this. And also, don't forget, subscribe, like, do all those things that everybody asks you to do. And in the meantime, have a good week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
All right, bye. Sorry, I got to start over.
I don't know why that's backwards. It's really weird.
Ah, shit. All right.
We'll get better at this as we go, I guess. And
what's going into the sausage here?
There's definitely some reflection off my head. Yeah, I may end up in federal prison.